Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Preston here from Bull City Reader, and welcome to this week's video. Well, it's been a little bit since I've done one of these. Near the end of 2018, about mid-November or so, I kind of ran into a reading funk till the end of the year last year and into this year. Just had a hard time finding time to read, finding a book that just grabbed my attention. I just really struggled and just got into a reading funk. Then one day I was walking through Barnes & Noble near the middle of January, and that is when I found a book that finally grabbed my attention, and so that is what I'm going to be reviewing today. So the book that grabbed my attention when I was in Barnes & Noble is called Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. This is the first book in his Wounded Kingdom series. It's a trilogy. There's 3 books out, and as far as I know, it's only going to be 3 books, and that is it. For those, just a little quick synopsis for you on the book. Our book follows our main character, Gerton Clubfoot. He is the apprentice to one of the best assassins in the land, and they have been called to the castle because the queen believes that someone is trying to assassinate her son. And as it says right here on the cover, to catch an assassin, use an assassin. So that's kind of the brief overview of the quick synopsis for this book. When I was reading the book, I sent the author R.J. Barker an email. It lists on his website that you could get signed book plates from him. He lives over in the UK. So I shot him an email, told him that I found his book and I was enjoying it. I'd like to get a book plate for the whole series because I bought the whole thing. He thanked me for buying the copy and said, you know, if you could, when you get done, if you could leave a review on Amazon. And I told him that I'm a booktuber and I actually record a book review. And he told me, once he found out that I had a booktube channel, he just said, hey, if you have any questions for your booktube channel, just let me know and I'll answer them for you. So I'm kind of going to throw those questions in here with this review. As I mentioned, I will do a review on Amazon and Goodreads. If you go on Amazon, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. On Amazon, this has 61 reviews, averaging a 4.4 stars. And if you go on Goodreads, it has 1,743 ratings, averaging a 3.99 star. So with all that being said, the first thing I was curious about once I finished the book is I wanted to know where he got his idea for this story. So I emailed him, and I'll put a photo up here of the book for the rest of the time because I'm going to have to go back to my sheet because I don't want to misquote the author in any way. So I asked him in an email, because you know it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I wanted to know what inspired him to write the story, and in his email he told me, it kind of jumped almost full formed in my head. The name of the Tired Lands appeared in my mind and it just felt really evocative. I knew what it looked like. Then the characters and the plot followed on really quickly and it all seemed to appear in my head, and I wrote the first version of Age of Assassins in about 6 weeks. In his answer that he gave me, he mentioned the Tired Lands, and the Tired Lands it kind of revolves around the magic system, and you learn more about it in the book. The magic system in the book, people that can use magic get their power from Earth. So depending on how strong of a spell you use and how much damage or whatever you want to do with your magic, it takes life from the Earth and makes it barren. And so that is kind of what the Tired Lands are. It's this huge, I don't want to say wasteland, because when I think wasteland, I think like apocalypse, but it's this huge land that's just barren. There's nothing really growing there, and it's almost like a desert because all the life has just been sucked out from an event that you'll learn more about when you read the book. So one of the things I was interested about, and I sent him all these questions at one time after I read the book. It's not like we were going back and forth. I didn't want to tie up too much of his time. I was curious where he got his idea for the magic system was, because I haven't read a book where people who can use magic kind of get the power from Earth and take a little bit from the Earth in order to use the magic. So I asked him where he got his idea for the magic system he used, and he told me, I suppose it's sort of an ecological allegory. I saw a strip mine, this big scar on the land where coal was being taken out, and it's really a quite literal interpretation of that on the most basic level. Power being taken from the land. I mean, there's other stuff going on, but that's a bit plot spoilery. but it's definitely the genesis of it, and it's also a good break on how magic is used. It creates a price, and it creates a logic behind the society's hatred of magic users. One thing that I really appreciated that R.J. Barker did in his story is he didn't give you massive info dumps. I feel like a lot of fantasy authors or people that create a world, maybe not fantasy or sci-fi, but people that have a history to their world, they just kind of like massive info dump on you. And that just kind of takes me out from the story. What he did is he gave you the history you needed to know at that point in the story. And it just flowed so smoothly. And he also did it with the backstory. As I mentioned a minute ago when I gave you the synopsis, Girton Clubfoot is the apprentice to the best assassin in the land. Her name is Marilla. And there's a little history on how he became an apprentice for Marilla. And another thing that I like, kind of like he did with the telling you the history of the land, is he didn't just give you all their history at once. Their history took place over years. And so there's interludes after so many chapters. He'll give you an interlude. And the interlude is a dream. It's a flashback of what happened, how they met, and how their relationship progressed to where it was. And I loved how he did that in his stories, both with the history for the world and the history between Girton and Marilla. So in my email, I asked him, why did you present the history of the world and their relationship the way that you did? And he responded back to me and said, a lot of fantasy books take place over a large time scale, where the Wounded Kingdom books are essentially murder mysteries or thrillers set around one important event in history of that world. So I didn't have the luxury of time that I may have had if I'd written it a different way. But I knew I needed to place you within Girton and Marilla's relationship because the book stands or falls on that. So these dreams let me guide you through that and play a little bit with style. The language is different and the presentation is different. As he mentioned, the books are kind of written like murder mystery thrillers, which really it is. This book is really a mystery. Who is trying to assassinate the queen's son? And you're trying to figure this out as you go along. So as I'm reading, I'm trying to figure out who's possibly, have I met the person that's trying to kill her son? Have I not met him? Who do I think's in on it? So to me, every chapter felt important. Every paragraph, there didn't seem to be anything wasted in the story. Everything was told for a reason. I asked him, were there any authors that inspired you to write that way? And if not, where did you learn to write that way? And he told me back in the email, I'm a big fan of crime writing, and one of the things I love about it, especially the sort of American masters, is the economy of language. There's a great quote, and who said it escapes me, about how everything should be working toward character or plot. Everything someone does should be for a reason. It tells you something about them, and the more work you can get a sentence to do, the easier it is overall to tell a story. It's really hard to name specific influences, as I've always read so much and it's all stored away in my head. I know that for the feel of the book, this sort of melancholy that I think pervades it, that a lot of people read as being like Robin Hood, which is a huge compliment. I was thinking about the historical crime writer C.J. Sampson, who writes the Matthew Shardlake books. So with this trilogy, all three books take place during a different point of time in Girton's life. So in book one, he is 15 years old. And so like I said, they've been called to the castle to find out who is trying to assassinate the queen's son. And so he has to be able to fit in, him and his master Marilla have to be able to fit into the castle and make it seem like they're part of everyday life there so people don't suspect anything. And this might be a tad bit spoilery, but I don't feel that it really is. You find this out in the first couple chapters. He's going to be with the other squires, the young squires that they have at the castle. So he's going to be going through training on how to fight. And so one thing that a lot of fantasy books and other books have is the hero who has to go from not knowing anything to being the hero, and they progress as the story goes along with their skills. In this story, Girton is already an assassin, and he has to kind of dumb his skills down so that way he doesn't give away that there's something different about him, that he is an assassin. And so for Marilla, his master, she's disguised as being with him, and she's kind of a jester of sorts that came with him to the castle. One thing that I really liked with the story, I really liked Marilla's character. To me, she seemed like Sherlock Holmes. The way that she taught seemed like a way Sherlock Holmes would teach, and she just really reminded me of Sherlock Holmes. So I asked him if Sherlock Holmes was an inspiration for her character, and he told me, bingo, all caps, bingo. Yes, definitely in her DNA. Though where Holmes's purpose is to be really clever and impressive, Marilla is a bit more low-key than that. But Holmes and Watson were definitely a starting point somewhere in my subconscious. And as you go through the books, she and Girton evolve because what they have is a familial relationship, and she isn't about being better than Girton. She's about making him as good as he can be, despite his attempts to wreck it on occasion. I then asked him what was his favorite character to write, which he told me. Now, I know you've only read Age of Assassins, so to answer this could be a bit spoilery. The truth is, it's an ensemble. So they are all fun to write, and they all come together, but Girton's voice is the one in my head, and it's very strong. It often feels more like taking dictation than writing. A bit like cheating. So as I said, I'll hold the book back up now that I'm done kind of going back to the emails that I had with him. Age of Assassin is a book that got me out of a reading funk. I really enjoyed it. I found myself putting down my Xbox remote and not playing as much PUBG to find out what was going to happen next in the book. I found myself at home trying to find time where I could get another chapter in, where I could find out what was going on. And on a few occasions, I did find myself staying up a little bit later than I wanted to at night just to know what happened next in the story. If you're an audiobook fan, the audiobook is absolutely amazing. I did listen to most of it and I did read along with it or read some by itself, but the audiobook is fantastic. The audiobook is narrated by a guy named Joe Jameson. I've never heard anything by him before. I've never heard him narrate anything before that I know of. I haven't gone to look at what he's done, but I really enjoyed the way that he told the story. I know I heard an interview with R.J. Barker, and he really enjoyed the way that the book was narrated. He said that he reads it a little bit differently in his own head, but that the narrator for the audiobook did an amazing job, and he actually likes the way that the narrator did the story. Overall, like I said, this was a very enjoyable book for me. I know I'm going to read the rest of the series. The way he ended it, since it's not a timeline, how like book 2's right after book 1, and you feel like a lot of books you feel like you need to jump into book 2 to know what happened. I don't feel there were too many loose ends, but from what I've heard, there are loose ends I may not realize are in the book until I read the other books. But the way he ended it, you complete the main story in this book, and then he leaves you with a little thing at the end to be like, and there's going to be more to this tale. I don't want to tell you what he says, but the way he ended the book was really good as well. Overall, this is a very enjoyable book. I love the way that R.J. Barker writes. I will be buying his books going forward because I like his writing style. And these are books that I will probably never get rid of because I enjoyed them that much. Is it a perfect book? To me, it didn't feel like a 5-star book, but it's up there. It's a great book. Overall, I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. Maybe even 4.25 stars out of 5. Very enjoyable book. I highly recommend you pick it up. This is fantasy. It's not very thick. It's a little over 400 pages, so it's not a clunker to read. And I feel like this book might be a good way for somebody to get into fantasy, as I want to get into more fantasy this year. I felt this book made me want to read more fantasy. I bought this big old series I showed you last time after buying this book, and I've bought a few other fantasy novels after reading this book. So I think this is going to be my gateway into reading more fantasy. But anyway, guys, I hope you liked the review that I did. If you want to see more videos and know when I put out videos, boom, subscribe right here. Boom, YouTube says that you'll like this video and supposedly it's on my channel. But that's all that I got for you this time, guys. Keep reading and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye, peoples.